today's awareness check will be on Fahrenheit, aka Indigo Prophecy, aka Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy Remastered. No Chrono Trigger today, although that will be next time. So, Fahrenheit, as it was originally called, was a 2005 PlayStation 2 game. But for several reasons, the game was renamed and heavily censored in North America. When it came out here, Michael Moore's documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, had just released 1 year prior. So, in order to prevent confusion and subsequently making it even more duplicitous, Quantic Dream was forced to rename the game to Indigo Prophecy, and in order to avoid an adult-only rating, it heavily censored most of its sexual content because of the hot coffee scandal also happening around this time. I have attempted to get my hands on Indigo Prophecy, aka Fahrenheit, and I will be calling it Fahrenheit because that was its name in literally every other territory outside of North America. But I have tried to get my hands on Fahrenheit for some time, but finding a copy on the PS2 is pretty difficult and expensive, and the game has had a lot of flack for its censorship in this territory. So as of January 2015, Quantic Dream actually released the game on Steam as Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy Remastered, and this restored all of the cut content in the game, and you can play with improved graphics, detail, texture, all of that. Currently, the Steam version is basically a director's cut of the game that North America never got to see. And so I am aware that there was a lot of controversy. Some people probably realize that there is a lot of censorship discussion going on in the games industry right now. And so, even as far back as 2005, people were historically importing the European PAL version of the game in order to play it as it was originally intended. And so the game actually sold pretty terribly in North America, and that was probably because of both marketing and because of the censorship issues. So I am actually probably one of few self-proclaimed Quantic Dream fans. I absolutely adored everything about Heavy Rain. It's one of my favorite games, actually. And so I was really excited because I'd heard a lot of good things about Fahrenheit because I knew it was some kind of crazy mystery thriller, and that's basically what Heavy Rain was, and so I was pretty excited to see what this game had in store. And so my experience playing it was that I played exactly half of it back in September, and then I just kind of lost interest, and I haven't played it in months. So eventually, a friend and I just kind of said, hey, well, let's make the push and finish it and just see what kind of crazy shit comes up next. So we literally just took an evening and played for 5 hours, and I played the entire second half of the game. Diving right in, the first thing I want to talk about are the graphics, and I did play a heavily remastered version. It is significantly upscaled, so I can't, in good conscience, comment on the graphical quality because I just didn't play it in its original form. So I don't want to say too much about the graphics, but I will say that in general, the overall presentation and the way the game was stylized, I thought was really, really awesome. This game really utilizes multiple camera angles and split screen, so you'll have 2 or more shots of what's happening simultaneously meshing into one. And so this was, I did read, explicitly influenced by the TV show 24, which, if you know me, I love that TV show and the way that it uses multiple angles to show, you know, the front door that a police officer is knocking on, and it shows the main game screen that the player character Lucas is running around trying to cover up these bloodstains with. So it's really impressive the way that that was done, and the whole point of Fahrenheit really was to be a truly cinematic experience and to be kind of like a movie and an interactive film. And David Cage, the writer and director, has basically called it the first interactive movie. And although I resist that qualification, I still think it kind of grasps at what the basic premise of this game is. The game definitely also utilizes a lot of film references, and the most notable of all of those is definitely The Matrix. And for the record, I have never seen The Matrix. But even I am capable of pulling out the precise moments that are as much of a Matrix ripoff as you can get. So unfortunately, that was one of the weaker aspects of Fahrenheit, was that some of its graphical presentation was extremely well done and very tense, and other parts of its graphical presentation were, like, atrocious. So I definitely have to comment on the integrity of the soundtrack, and so the music was scored by a man named Angelo Badalamenti, and he's worked on films. And so I really thought that the music really suited and really heightened a lot of the moments in the game. It's not super, like, dynamic and orchestral and, like, big and bombastic. It's a lot of subdued, like, set pieces, and it really kind of works with the mise-en-scene and the way that the multiple camera angles and camera shots are working together. It really works in tandem, is what I'm trying to say. And so, like, it's very atmospheric. The music sets the mood rather than tries to emphasize the action. So there will be a music piece for the time sequences, or the chase sequences, or the fight sequences. Another really neat aspect of Fahrenheit that I had no idea was a thing was that it actually uses a lot of licensed music in the game. Like, half the soundtrack is licensed songs, and each character is kind of infused with different musical styles, and so it kind of brings out a lot of the characterization as well. So I thought that the licensed music was used it's used sparingly, but it's used well, and I thought that it really kind of added to the experience as a whole. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about the plot and story of this game, which starts out pretty straightforward. So the basic premise, if you're not at all familiar with Fahrenheit, is that the opening scene is that you wake up on a dirty toilet and you realize that you've just stabbed this dude to death. And so the opening scene, which is, like, so well produced and, like, really intense and, like, really awesome, you have to clean up the blood and you have to hide the weapon and have to, like, maintain composure as you're leaving this restaurant because, well, as it turns out, you were just possessed by a Mayan oracle who can, like, use people as conduits to commit murders in order to, like, maintain the status quo of some kind. So the other half of the game is playing as the two police detectives who are trying to track down Lucas. And so you get to play as both sides of this crime. And while we're led to believe that Lucas is innocent, like, he has clearly been possessed, you're still being forced to hunt the same clues that you leave. Like, you have to find the murder weapon and stuff like that. So the premise is basically just, like, trying to solve this crime and figuring out who really is committing these murders. And the premise itself is really cool, and I loved the aspect of Heavy Rain where you are playing as both the killer and playing as the detectives hunting him down. Like, I love that drama of that kind of setup. But where Heavy Rain kind of sticks to the realistic and the gritty, Fahrenheit eventually devolves into just like a mess of throwing in plot twists for the sake of plot twists without really supporting them with any kind of solid evidence or meaning. Like, it just... When I finished the game, my gut reaction was to compare it to, like, the kind of convoluted storytelling of the Metal Gear Solid series. But then, upon further reflection, I realized that this is nothing like Metal Gear Solid. Like, everything Metal Gear Solid does, every reference to an actual historical event, every political reference, every philosophical reference has a very, very deliberate meaning, and you're supposed to unpack it. But the things that Fahrenheit does in terms of its storytelling, like throwing in this twist that there's like a Mayan cult, and throwing in this twist that there are AIs from the future, and throwing in the twist that, like, Lucas dies and can now have, like, superhuman Matrix powers. Like, it's just nonsense, and nothing about it is convincing, and it's just, like, throwing ridiculous scenarios on top of each other, and I just don't even know how to react to it. By the, like, 3/4 of the way through the game, I just didn't even care what was going on. I was like, I just need to see how this concludes. Comparing this to Heavy Rain, like, Heavy Rain really delivers on its promises that it sets up in the beginning, and Fahrenheit just kind of takes those promises and it throws them out the window, and it's like, you thought that this is gonna be a normal game? Well, guess what? It's just crazy shit that David Cage wrote, and while, like, this game has so many haters, I don't think that it's quite that terrible. It's just, it's not appealing, and it shouldn't appeal to anybody, really, but there are definitely worse games out there, and games with worse stories in particular, so it's certainly not for everybody. It is a niche kind of game, and you have to like the things that Quantic Dream does if you want to like this game. Overall, towards the end, I also felt that there were just too many unresolved questions. Like, I just really wanted to know what happened to Tyler. Like, regardless of what you choose to do with Tyler, his storyline ends so abruptly, and you're given no closure whatsoever. And I felt terrible, because Tyler, I thought, was the most realistic of all of the characters. And he was the most compelling, and he gets the least screen time, and the least attention, and the least characterization. But he seemed the most human. There's just so much going on, and characters like Jade and Agatha are just, like, completely superfluous and serve very little purpose outside of just being plot devices. So it's kind of disappointing to see so much squandered potential with the writing that's already there. Like other Quantic Dream games, most of the action unfolds using the analog sticks, and so this one actually uses both analog sticks rather than just the right analog stick. So it took me a very long time to figure that out, and because I didn't grasp onto that immediately, I actually missed exploiting the really infamous sex scene that was censored, because it is a fully interactive sex scene. As I have read and seen, I have not experienced it myself because I am terrible at playing the guitar via controller input, apparently, so I was unable to seduce Lucas's ex-girlfriend Tiffany, and so I did not get to see the glory of the pixelated sexual encounter that so many people were upset was removed from the game. So I basically played the censored North American version anyway. So, you know, what can you do? A lot of the storytelling and gameplay kind of unfold simultaneously, in that you're often you can be put in a domestic setting and, you know, go be fetching a glass of water or eating a slice of pizza, and that is the kind of action that you control. Or you can also be put in the absolute antithesis of those domestic settings, and you can be in the midst of one of the ridiculously absurd and brutal fight scenes that last for, like, way too long. The fight scenes, although intriguing at first, and my mind was absolutely blown by the fight with the angels in the church. Like, all of a sudden, these angels come to life and start attacking you, and you start flying around and punching angels in the face, which, like, this is real talk. This is absolutely a scene in the game. The scenes switch from fighting this Mayan cult guy on the roof of an orphanage and shooting invisible fireballs and using the toilet. It's pretty crazy all around. The last aspect of gameplay that I feel really warrants a lot of discussion is that although it could be a limitation of the PlayStation 2 hardware, like, I was very disappointed in how little flexibility you actually get to make decisions in the game. With Heavy Rain, the general plot is still ultimately the same, but failing to find certain clues or pieces of evidence can make that case unsolvable. In Fahrenheit, Lucas can fail to cover up all of the evidence, and Carla and Tyler can find every piece of evidence, and the game's plot still unfolds in exactly the same way. The only thing that matters are, like, 3 decisions you make towards the end of the game that affect your ending. And so I found that was extremely disappointing, and I know that this was 2005, and it is, you know, still relatively primitive for being PlayStation 2. But I still felt like there should have been more options, especially if you're going to market this as such a heavily choice-based game. Like, you have options to answer questions differently, and you can make people suspicious of you, and it doesn't do anything, it just leads you to a fail state of the game. You know, it won't progress if you don't answer questions or behave adequately. Well, those were all interesting avenues to pursue. Like, I liked the aspect of Heavy Rain that no matter what you do, Heavy Rain, and even something like Until Dawn did this excellently, is that, like, no matter what you do, the game still continues, and you can continue with a certain number of characters failing to complete their goals. And it's one thing to give plot armor to Lucas in order to get him to the conclusion, but I don't think that Carla and Tyler need that same plot armor. It's frustrating that, you know, Carla can do shit police work and still wind up discovering the identity of the killer and so on and so forth. So it's just, like, kind of stretching my expectations a little bit too far. The plot is really just serving itself, and it's not there so much to serve the player. So finally, I simply can't discern whether this game is pure camp or if David Cage is in on the joke. So, like, the fact that there are so many scenes that blow my mind and leave me completely dumbfounded, I don't know how to actually address those. It tries a lot of things, but it tries too hard to be outside of its own medium. There were so many things that it could have been that it wasn't, and it should have been those things, but it just was oversight. If I were to rate this game, I'd give it, like, a C, because it passes. It's genuinely interesting for the most part, but, like, when it doesn't really accomplish what I think it set out to do, it kind of gives it that demerit that makes it not really succeed. Coming up next, we will definitely have Chrono Trigger. I have been playing that, and I have been loving it from start to finish, so I'm definitely looking forward to getting together my thoughts on Chrono Trigger. After Chrono Trigger, I am going to again be on the lookout for something to play, so I may put up another poll. I may try to get some more opinions on that. I have lots of games in my backlog, so we will not be running out of things soon. But till then, I hope you have a good one, and hang in there, okay? Thanks.